Welcome to another Baby Theater in the Dark. Ah, yes. Tonight, we'll be telling the tale of Ardvark Cemetery. You see, there was once a cemetery that really held the worst of the worst of baddies. Anybody that could be considered, well, I dare say it, evil, were buried here. Now, Ardvark Cemetery wasn't just named this because of any anything positive. It's only named this because, well, it was overrun with ants. Wherever you would look, there'd be ant piles. If you step on one, they would feast upon the feet. Some said that this was because it was a damned graveyard with evil residing within. Others say that it was a rare type of ant that really should be called the Ardvark Killer because of how brutal they are. But, nevertheless, no one really knows why the ants behave this way. But it's been told that a few grave robbers one day attempted to steal some bodies and jewelry. Well, what they found instead was the bodies next morning, eaten from the brain up. Now, their face melted away, and all that was left was red marks on their skin. The ants were too brutal to leave anything behind. But they did leave some fantastic bodies there. Pristinely disgusting. Now, the cemetery was so overrun with these ants that they had to call an exterminator. And you see, the exterminator, he had it even worse. He had a full body suit to protect himself from these ants. The sad part was, as soon as they found one single hole, well, let's just say the exterminator was exterminated. Now, they didn't know what to do exactly because, well, they needed to bury more bodies, but they couldn't even dig in the ground without these ants just covering their bodies, so they simply sold the place. Now, I would say that it's a harsh deal or a bad deal, but with the amount of dollars that they sold it for, well, anyone would know anything and really know that they shouldn't have bought it, but alas, they ended up purchasing it just simply for the parking lot, as a matter of fact. To place one, that is. Now, there was going to be a shopping mall there once, but once they paved the concrete over all the ant piles and the ants and all that, well, what was left was a bunch of ant piles buried under concrete. And the ants lived underground peacefully. They never had to attack a living creature. But they did find the dead. And well, that struggled some things up. The dead began to rise out of their graves These are spirits. And as they were in a parking lot, well, any kind of car or a vehicle that parked there, well, they would simply drive it away, move on to the sunset. One of these amazing, horrible people, amazingly horrible people, picked up a Chevy Malibu and began to drive it away. Grand Theft Auto, they say. But when you're a spirit, what is it really? Can you be charged after the dead? And could they give you the death penalty when you're already dead and damned? Well, I'll tell you. Old Joe, he really took it further than anyone else, I think. It could be, but he drove the Chevy Malibu until he reached the ocean. He simply drove it into the ocean because driving cars into the ocean is as a couple of websites say, a safe and cheap thrill. Well, but that isn't the only one. Now Joe he does live under the sea now, but that's for another tale. One thing to consider when you're talking about these convicts is remember that they lived horrible lives, so sometimes they've never even driven before. In this case, I drove a Toyota Tundra. They drove it off the parking lot, and the funny thing is, the woman that was driving was just going in for groceries and left their dog in the car. Why would they do it? Why would they do it? We don't know. One thing we do know is that whenever they kept driving, the dog barked and startled them. And they simply crashed very quickly, but the dog actually had no injuries. And of course, the spirit had no injuries as well. And the spirit, his name was James. Well, James the spirit really took a liking to the dog and cared for the dog and made sure he had a good home and was fed simply by hunting people and utilizing the dog's abilities. You see, the spirit was able to unlock the dog's brain, and now it was able to speak human language. It actually was able to dance, which some people say, well, dogs can dance. No. I'm talking about the tango. Dun 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. The dog would tango everywhere, all over. It was amazing. It was a sight to see. I hope that you can see it right now in your mind. And open your mind to that dog dancing, and I hope that he dances the tango as beautifully as you ever could. I hope so, because that's what I want. Nevertheless, there was one more. They stole a Dodge Charger and drove it and drove it and drove it. Well, you see, the funniest part about the Dodge Charger is when it runs out of gas and you're a spirit, all you can do is siphon other gas from other cars and bring it into your mouth and dump it in your tank. Now, the problem was he was abandoned on a long stretch of highway. So he had to carry this gas in his belly. 2,500 miles. Just for a little bit of a go. Some say that he's still doing this today. Sadly, he gets 1 mile or so, if that, at a time, back to where they need to be. Well, that's sad. That's sad for poor Dwayne. Well, that didn't really work out because the parking lot was a hotbed for theft, so they had to tear down the parking lot, and what was left was, well, the ants had grown quite large now. They feasted upon the dead bodies, and, well, there was one grave that seemed a little different from the rest. It actually had some kind of odd genetic failure inside of it. Now, when the ants ate this, they began to get more and more intelligent. And one thing I dare say, well, let's just say that instead of ant mounds, they began to build ant mounds with human bodies, traveling through the eye sockets and the fingers, the mouth, any type of hole that they could find. The horror of it all. Now, as you can think, A, they wouldn't be able to sell this anymore, and B, well, they really couldn't build anything on it because states mandate that you can't just move dead bodies willy-nilly, and the ants just kept getting them. It seemed like these ants found bodies elsewhere as well. There were exterminators and random people that had walked upon the area, but soon they were finding bodies everywhere, and the horror. This is the worst part, I think, of all, is they dug such a deep underground tunnel that they managed to grab bodies from all graveyards. They just kept building it and building it and building it. And they even had an underground tunnel, even under the ocean, to travel overseas and grasp more bodies and more bodies. Well, soon it wasn't just the parking lot. Soon it was the neighborhood itself. And the bodies kept growing and growing and growing. All the dead in the world were piled upon one area. Oh my. It's getting closer. I hear there's only a small amount of space left, and, well, I believe my house is about to get devoured itself. They're coming, and the radio's been long dead. They say to evacuate, but where is there to evacuate now? The ocean? The ocean. Yes. Well, maybe I'll have to do some podcasts, some YouTubes in the depths of the ocean. Well, will see what my fortune fails. My fortune will see what you find there in the depths